And with no further ado, I give the mic on to Alice Shepherd. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Beatrice. Hello, everyone, and thank you all so much for coming to the storytelling webinar, which is organised by the European Citizen Science Association's Storytelling Working Group. Citizen science is a process where any member of the public, not necessarily employed as a scientist, can undertake scientific research. This can be in a very major way or in quite a minor way, and it has a huge amount of variety. The European Citizen Science Association has several working groups, and one of these is on storytelling and other arts, because science, especially citizen science, is a very human activity, and humans often think of science in stories. The stories are a wonderful way to connect people and the work that we do. It's my great pleasure to introduce Affelia, who is an amazing science communicator and astronomer. They are currently undertaking a PhD in planetary science at University College London's Mullard Space Science Laboratory. Their research uses telescopes and spacecraft to study Jupiter's X-rays and very strong auroras. Before that, they worked in science communication for a decade, and they still do. They've been on several TV programs and written for The Guardian and NASA and worked at the Royal Greenwich Observatory. Recently, they gave a talk at the Royal Institution. They specialise in communicating complex theories in an entertaining and digestible manner. They want to enthuse everyone from toddlers to grandparents about astronomy. 2 years ago, I saw a brilliant presentation by Ophelia about storytelling in science communication, and I asked if they'd be kind enough to share their expertise with us, because science communication is such an important part of citizen science. And I was delighted when they said yes. So thank you for coming, Ophelia. Over to you.
Oh yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, thanks for inviting me, and thank you to everyone for coming along. So like Alice said, I used to be a science communicator, and I used to present shows and workshops, mostly for school groups and families, so lots of kids, but occasionally there'll be an all-adult audience. Now these shows involved a lot of demos and props and audience participation. And there were explosions and chemicals, and I also worked with a really temperamental planetarium, so there was lots going on. And then when I started the PhD, I really missed that side of my old life, because presenting is what I love to do the most. My research group at MSSL have weekly meetings, and then someone will present their work, and I was really excited to give my first talk. I had to wait a while because I was the first year, but eventually the time came. I had my slides already, and I practiced at loads. I had this killer intro that I was super proud of, where I was going to tell everyone to look out for Jupiter that evening. And then I started to get really nervous about a week before. And I didn't really know why. I know it's normal to get nervous before a talk, but then these nerves turned into dread. And on paper, this was going to be a really simple and straightforward talk, just 15 minutes with a few PowerPoint slides. There was no risk of me setting myself on fire, or, didn't have to worry about making someone cry. So what was going on? And then I realized that it was because it was going to be a different kind of presentation to what I was used to. Firstly, I was going to talk about my work and my science, so it felt a lot more personal, and the audience was going to be different. I was going to be faced with a room full of experts instead of 5-year-olds. And I did think maybe I should change my talk, rewrite a whole new talk, and just completely change my style. But then it's kind of too late, it's a few days before the talk, and I thought, I'll just try it. If it works, then great. If not, then I'll do something else next time round. And luckily, it went all right. And I got some good feedback afterwards. And I thought, oh, was that a fluke, or is there something in this? So I gave almost the exact same talk at a conference a few months later, my first science conference. And again, I got some good feedback. And someone said to me afterwards that they liked my talk because I wasn't talking at them, I was telling a story. And that's when it clicked. Presentation is a presentation. Like, well, no matter what kind of presentation you do, they're all kind of the same. Sure, the audience is going to be different, so your content is going to be different, and the language you use is going to be different, but you can use the same tools and techniques in pretty much every presentation. So these tools and techniques that I use as a science communicator, I now use in all of my science talks at conferences and meetings and things. And hopefully you'll find some of these techniques helpful. So today, this webinar is going to be interactive, so I will ask questions. Feel free to use the chat to answer them. There will also be some activities that I'll ask you to do. So if you have something nearby that you can write things on, that would be great, or open up a Word document. And I will ask some of you to share what you've come up with, again, through the chat. But first up, I wanted to ask you, what is the point of presentations? As scientists, why do we give presentations? Transfer a message, yeah. To share. Announce a new project or result, to share work, to show off, get feedback. Excellent, yeah, to communicate, to visualize, build networks, make people understand, yeah. What about stories then? Why do we tell stories? What's the point of them? Just share, yeah, connect people, draw people in. Give people something to care about, make the message accessible. Stories have a purpose and help people see the motivation behind what we do. Humanize experiences, yeah, human connection, make things relevant, bring people into your world. Cool, yeah. So there's quite a lot of similarities there, right, between science talks, science presentations, and storytelling. In both, you're trying to convey a message, you're trying to possibly teach something. But I think one big difference is entertainment. Stories are entertaining, you know, that's why we read books and watch films and things. Whereas if you're in a conference, you're not really there to entertain the audience. She'll make your talks engaging, but you're not there to like entertain them. And that's not what we're going to do today. We're not going to become professional storytellers. We're just going to use some of those techniques to make our science talks more engaging. And I think that's what presentation should be. It should be a two-way engagement between the presenter and the audience. The presenter should be aware of what the audience might be thinking or feeling, and the audience could perhaps even challenge the presenter in some ways as well. So why should we use storytelling techniques in our talks? Alice says, yeah, people remember stories, make it relatable. So it has been shown that when you tell a story to someone, their brain sort of lights up in lots of different ways. So you engage more of your brain when you listen to a story than you do if you're just being told a load of facts. It can be a really powerful way to inspire people, to get them to do what you want them to do, like give you more funding. And storytelling helps to put pictures in people's heads. They transport people. They transport people to do things, and they sort of can relate to you or to your characters in your talk a bit better. And it has been shown actually by using brain scans that when you listen to a story, you feel like you're part of that story yourself. You feel like you're experiencing what the character is experiencing too. And I think what's really important, and what I do all the time before I give a talk, is to think about the purpose of your talk. Why are you giving this talk? What is your main point? And it's I think nice to keep things simple. So just have one main idea that you want to convey, and then you can go deeper into that idea. So think backwards. So start with your endpoint, what you want to convey, and then go back. Okay, for them to understand what you're trying to tell them, what do they need to know? And for them to understand that, what else do they need to know? And then you work backwards. And so when you sort of translate these to your slides, I think it's really important to make sure that you don't have too much on your slide. So one slide should sort of be one step forward in your story. And one way to check that you've got this right is perhaps see if you can tweet about each of your slides. So can you explain what you're trying to tell them in 280 characters for each slide? And if you think back to like when you're at school and you're told to tell a story or to write a story, you're told like that every story needs to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And usually when you give talks, this translates to introduction, content, and summary. And when I was at uni, when I did my science communication course there, my lecturer said you should tell your audience what you're going to tell them, and then you're going to tell them what you're telling them, and then you're going to tell them what you've just told them. And the idea, I think, is that people remember things if they're repeated, but it's kind of boring because you're just hearing the same thing 3 times. So why should your audience listen to the rest of your talk if you know what you're going to tell them? It's a bit like if you watch a film and you're told right at the start how it's going to end, you're not going to watch the rest of that film. There's no sort of curiosity there. So I think what's more effective, perhaps, is to structure your talk like this. First, you present the problem. It could be the question that you're trying to answer in your study. And then the middle part is your action or your struggle. What did you do? And then any setbacks that you might have had. And then you talk about your results. And to have a really nice resolution, conclusion, tie that result back to the problem that you sort of introduced at the start, because then the audience kind of sees the point of what you're trying to tell them, and you know, it's kind of like that happy ever after sort of ending. And most people, or most of the time, you would like to have your hook at the start because that's what draws your audience in. And to me, a hook is anything that gets your audience hooked in. Well, that's kind of the point. That's why they're called hooks. But the get them curious. So this is like anything that makes them go, oh, okay, interesting. There are a number of ways that you could do this. You could start with a question, because that instantly makes them think about whatever you want them to think about. It could be a rhetorical question, it could be an actual question that you want them to answer. You could introduce an information gap. So tell them something that they don't know, and then that will hopefully lead them to want to listen to, like, you know, how you came to that idea, or to learn more about what you just told them. You could make a big bold statement. So TED Talks are really good at doing that, you know. Or you could try to hook the heart, try to make the audience feel something. There are just a few ideas there. So we've got the 3 sections of your story. But what else do you need in a story? So these are, you know, 6 classic things that you would find in any stories. First up is your character. And there are sort of 3 main characters. So the hero. So the hero is usually a person, a character that needs to do something, and then the audience will sort of follow this hero around. They need to achieve a goal or to find something out. And then a nemesis, a villain. So this character doesn't necessarily have to be a person. It's just something that gets in the way of the hero. So it could be a broken instrument, or you've run out of funding. That could be your nemesis. And then a sage, or a friend sort of likes to call them the magical helper. So this is like the genie in Aladdin. It's someone that has a power or a knowledge or a contact or funds or skills that the hero doesn't have. So if you're a PhD student, it could be your supervisor, it could be your funder, it could be, any of these things. So when you're writing about your research, have a think about what characters are involved and what people are involved in your science, and then the setting. So when you're talking about a science talk, then this will be the background to the study. So any previous work that you've done or that someone else has done, this sort of introduces your audience to your topic. And then every story needs some kind of tension or a conflict, something that your hero needs to overcome. So this could be the question that you're trying to answer in your study, any setbacks that you might have had, and you can have multiple of these, of course. And then the action is, what did you do? How did you try to overcome these setbacks? What did you find out? And one action could actually lead to another setback, and that's how you can sort of structure a talk that way. And then the climax is your conclusions, and then finally you talk about what your study actually means for the field. So I think essentially a story is just they're about people, shared experiences. So don't worry about putting people stuff in, make it relatable. And the story, I think, is just a person in a place doing a thing or trying to solve a thing. And in science, that's kind of what we're trying to do. Right? We're trying to solve problems, trying to answer questions. So you've got all of these ingredients. You need a narrative. And every Pixar film has the same kind of structure. It starts off with, once upon a time, there was something, a character. Every day they would do this until one day something happened. Because of that, this happened. Because of that, something else happened. Until finally it was resolved. And ever since then, they all lived happily ever after. So what's good about this structure is that there's a real sort of cause and effect here, right? People like to know what happens next. And with this structure, I think it lends to that very well. And each part does a different job. So the first two sentences, you're setting the scene, you're introducing the character and the setting and the situation, until one day something's happened, something's changed. There's a problem that you need to solve. Because of that, okay, what you're going to do to try and solve this problem, and then what's the consequence of that action, and then you end with the climax and the resolution. You talk about your results and your conclusions. So I thought it might be fun to try and write a Pixar film using this structure. So I'll give you a few minutes. I'll give you, 3 minutes. And you could jot things down on a piece of paper. And if you're really happy to, put it in the chat. And then hopefully we'll go through some of your stories. Now, it doesn't have to be about your science. It can be about anything, about your cat, your day. Minutes to do that. Okay, how are you getting on with your stories? So I'm finished. I want to share. You can either type it in the chat, if you are comfortable to unmute and tell us your story. Should I maybe give an example to start things off, just in case we're shy?
Yes.
Yeah. Just if you want. Okay, that's cool, Simon. I'll tell you the story that my friend actually came up with while you were, typing up your stories. Once upon a time, there was a PhD student. Every day they wrote some code in MATLAB until one day there was an error. Because of that, the whole code broke. Because of that, the whole project was doomed until finally they added the semicolon. Ever since then, they use Python. I think that's very relatable.
Anyone feels like sharing their story?
Oh, I see.
Give it a try. I didn't finish the middle part because I would need to do a little more specific research, but I'll just kind of murmur over it, and I'm sure it'll still work. All right. Once upon a time, there was nature versus nurture. Every day, scientists would argue that a mother's love would be more important, or one's genes determine one's fate, until one day we stopped doing that. And because of that, now we don't have to choose. And because of that, we are now focusing more of our time and resources in studying the intersections and interactions of nature and nurture. Ever since then, we've been learning much more about what it means to be human.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. I enjoyed that. That was great. Yeah. Alice has put us a story in the chat as well. And Aaron as well. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I don't know if you wanted to read it out or I can. Once upon a time, some citizen scientists wanted to go to Enceladus. Every day, they looked at Saturn through the telescope and wondered why it had geysers. Until one day, the Cassini mission went along. They were very happy, but also a little envious. They read all the papers about the Cassini mission, but had trouble understanding them. So they asked a friendly scientist to tell them how to make papers more accessible. The scientists didn't have much time, but did their best. They began asking their friends for help. And lots of people had lots of great ideas for how to translate scientific papers and found out lots about Enceladus as they did so. Then lots of people found that they loved him in Enceladus and were really interested in it and its geysers. Scientists applied for funding to go again, which they got, and found out much more, and they all lived happily ever after. Nice. Very good. And finally, Aaron, people from the city of Valencia in eastern Spain lived happy in the soils of their city. They could grow their veggies and build their houses and move from one place to another. But one day, they realized they had no more soil to make gardens and parks, and it was contaminated by cars. Because of that, citizens, scientists, and policymakers and businesses had to get together to a solution so their soil was not polluted, and all collaborated to gather data and the soils and to find actions to protect them. Thank you very much. Very nice. Yeah, that's a true story, I gather. And Simon, thank you for sharing. Okay, once upon a time, there was a sad fox. Every day she toured the tunnels and canals of London, searching for a snack or free. Until one day, on a stormy night in October, she stumbled upon the sacred orb of Zeus. She touched the orb with a paw and immediately transformed into a flying fox. Because of that, she could fly around the rooftops, soaring through the sky instead of traipsing around the canal side. And because of that, she felt free and liberated from the streets, until finally she bumped into a group of street foxes having a lovely time playing games on a street corner. She realized that everywhere you are can be good and happy. Very heartwarming. That was very good. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for taking part in that activity and for sharing. I hope you found that quite, not as hard as you thought that it might be. So that's one sort of narrative structure you could use. If you didn't like that, there's another one. This is one that I sort of talked or used in the orbits meeting that Alice talked about. We could try to write another story, but I'll give you sort of a shorter time just because of the time that we've got left. Because I knew also that I wondered, I suspected that it then, so which told me that. Give you a couple minutes if you want to try and write another story. And again, this could be about anything you like. And if anyone is finished and would like to share, please do so. You could do it in the chat or you could unmute. A really simple story that I wrote during the Orbits meeting was because I saw that the cat was meowing. I wondered if they were hungry. I suspected that if I had fed them already, then I would see the packet in the bin. So I looked in the bin and saw that there was a packet of food there, which told me that the cat had been fed and he was just being greedy. Oh, Alice. Because I saw Galaxy Zoo, I wondered if I would be able to get into astronomy after all. I suspected that if I spent all my time classifying galaxies and answering astronomy questions on the discussion forum, I would be super happy. So I did, and I was happy. But I still followed MSc Astrophysics, which told me that it takes a lot to become an astrophysicist, but everyone can contribute to astronomy. Thank you. Yeah, definitely. Everyone can contribute to astronomy. The sky is, everyone's. Doesn't belong to a single person. It's accessible to most people, which is why I like astronomy so much. Aaron, again, because I set up Bird on the Dunes, I wondered where it could go to escape from the people and the dogs that summer. I suspected that if a dog or person found it would die, then the species will at the long term will disappear. So I called the police to protect the beach, and the fences in the beach was told me that the species could be saved. Wow, that's excellent. So yeah, there's two different sort of narratives that you could use in your talks. And if you're still not sure, or you still don't believe that you can use like storytelling techniques in your talks, then maybe this will change your mind. Every line is like a thing that you do in science. So the first line is the question, right? In science, you're trying to answer a question, and then you make your hypothesis, and then you do your experiment, and then you get your results, and then you discuss and you conclude what you find out. So yeah, I hope that helps you try to find the stories in your science. The final few minutes, I just wanted to show you a few shapes that you could use in your story. So it's the sort of the rise and fall of emotion that your audience feels as the fortunes of your character changes. That's what makes the story relatable instead of the actual events or like the facts that you're telling them. And a good story is never static. It moves along, over time. There's lots of highs and lows, and then you sort of follow the characters' experiences during these highs and lows. And one shape that you could use is the mountain. So this is good for if you're reviewing your project or if you're reporting on something. It's good to show how you overcame a series of challenges. And it builds tension slowly, and then you can have a very sort of satisfying ending as well. So the idea is that you start off at base camp, and then you go up the mountain, you march towards this a goal, you're trying to reach the top of the mountain, and then you have successes and setbacks along the way, which are all these sort of peaks and troughs. And what keeps the audience interested is, how are we going to get to the top of the mountain? And that's a lot of TV series actually use this structure. So each episode has its own sort of problem, and they talk about how they solve the problem, and then that builds up to the series finale at the end. And then you can actually end your story at different places. You can end at the top of the mountain, you've reached your goal, excellent. Or you could sort of end at a lower point where you perhaps find that your results were due to an instrumental effect rather than something physical. But the point is that you're ending at a different place to where you started. And lots of films use the structure as well, like Lord of the Rings. They're going on adventure. And another shape or structure that is quite similar but kind of opposite is the drummer or the person in the hole. So now instead of going up a mountain, you found yourself in a hole, and you're trying to get yourself out of the hole. And that's a curiosity driver here. Now, how are we going to get out of this hole? So you could use this structure if perhaps your research area has a widely accepted idea, and then suddenly a new piece of evidence comes along and throws a spanner in the works, and then you find that everything that you knew or everything that people thought was correct turns out to be wrong. So how do we fix things? You could talk about how you try to look for mistakes or check for mistakes in the previous experiment, or do you try and find more evidence? So a film that uses this structure is Gravity. And next one is slightly different. So if you want to maybe pitch an idea, or if you want to compare two ideas, then you can use the spark line sort of structure. So Nancy Duarte, I think it was the first person to sort of use this. I think she came up with it. But this is good for if you want to inspire the audience to action. So if you're trying to, get more funding, if you're writing a proposal, you could maybe use this sort of structure. So this works by highlighting the differences between two situations. So usually it's, where we are versus how we could be. So the bottom state is how it is at the moment. And then you jump up to the top stage where you talk about how things could be. So you could say something like, at the moment, we see this, we think this, but if we had more time with the telescope, if we have more funding, or if we, get to go to this conference, then we could achieve this. And you can use sort of motivating and warning stories for the two stages as well. So the curiosity driver here is, which idea is going to win, I guess. And Captain America 2 kind of uses the structure because you've got Captain America and Iron Man fighting together or against each other, and you want to know who wins. But if you're trying to inspire the audience to do something, then it's good to have or to end on a high point so that they're inspired to actually do what you want them to do, if that makes sense. And finally, the last structure is the petal structure. So this one is for explanations, especially if you've got lots of different ideas or processes. There's lots of different strands to your story, and you want to show the audience how all these different parts fits together. Or for example, if you've got multiple speakers and they're all talking about a central theme. So the idea here is that each petal is a clue or an example or a case study, and then you start and end on that main point. So this is a bit like a murder mystery. So films like Murder on the Orient Express sort of use the structure. And the curiosity driver here is how does one piece of the puzzle fit into the other pieces? So how does one clue fit to the last clue and to the next clue? And how does it all sort of fit in? And sort of coming to the end of the main part of the webinar, but I thought it might be useful to sort of talk through a few more things. So in your talks, having a star moment, something that they'll always remember, is good for them to remember what your talk was about, to remember you, to be inspired to do what you want them to do. Language, I think, is really important when you're giving talks. It doesn't matter what audience you're talking to. I think avoiding complicated language is really sort of helpful. And to use language that are descriptive as well, I think can be really helpful. Use sensory details and descriptions, help your audience to transport to a different place or to experience what you experience, to make your stories and your talks more relatable. And similarly, using metaphors and similes can help to connect something new to the audience to something that they're familiar with. So something that I always say is Jupiter's aurora, or the X-ray aurora, are sort of fixed on Jupiter. So when the planet spins, you see the aurora rotate in and out of view. So Jupiter is like a lighthouse in this way. So using visuals or images or plots or graphs in your slides can really help to supplement your story and to sort of explain what you're trying to say a bit better, I think. So yeah, putting people in your talks is really important to make it relatable. So in astronomy, in planetary science, you don't really, it's kind of different to if you're in the medical field where there's a lot of ethics involved. So be careful of that. You could tell a personal story, but again, don't make it too revealing. Is there an emotional thread to your story as well? Can you add that to your talk? And be concise. This relates back to the main idea that you wanted to convey. So it's good to have details, but have necessary details. And when you're presenting, think about how you're delivering your talk. So think about the volume, the pitch, the pacing. Maybe put a few pauses here and there to really drive a point across, and have a strong and deliberate ending, something that will possibly lift your audience up to inspire them to do something. And with that, I hope that, I know that was quite a whirlwind talk through storytelling techniques, but I hope that's really helpful, and happy storytelling. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ophelia. That was so interesting and so inspiring. Yeah, I love science storytelling, and I can't wait to try some more of these out for myself. So I think, was it that we were going to stay around until 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock British time? Then in which case we've probably got time for some questions and answers.
We do have time, yes.
Brilliant. Yeah, so if you'd prefer to put your question in written form in the Zoom chat or even on Twitter, then I think we can manage with that. Otherwise, if you'd like to ask a question, then please unmute yourself. And if lots of you want to ask at once, we can do the hand raising.
Hi, I'll start. I always have trouble because I've heard a little bit of that structuring before, especially the Pixar storytelling. I've always had trouble deciding like what the character is within science storytelling, because it's like, is it me? Like, and I don't, sometimes it could be if I'm really talking about the process, but when I'm trying to communicate my studies or like, giving a presentation on a particular topic, I really have trouble deciding like what the character is in my like computational neuroscience literature review, So do you have any thoughts or tips?
Yeah, I think the go-to is usually yourself. So I think, it's your story, make yourself the hero, why not? Or make yourself the villain. Depends on how you think of it. You could talk about your actual research subjects. So sometimes I actually make Jupiter the character of my story, or about the charged particles that actually cause the aurora. They could become the characters as well. So yeah, I don't know what your actual research is. So I don't know. It might be harder for some research areas than others.
I've definitely had easier ones and tougher ones to decide that, for sure. There are tough ones. Yeah.
And like you're making your instruments characters as well. So ECSA did a really good job with Rosetta and Philae a few years ago. They were like the heroes when they of that story. Oh, okay. Question in the chat. What was meant by show, don't tell, use sensory details or descriptions? So the difference, I think, is, for example, you could say something like, you just, telling to me is just giving them the facts and say this happens and this happens and this happens. When you're showing them something, you could sort of do it through a journey, I guess. So you could start from the beginning and say, well, Jupiter's aurora works because like this. So we start off with the sun. The sun gives off charged particles, and then they make their way out to the solar system. Blah 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 blah. And sensory details and descriptions are again sort of really describing what's happening. So you could talk about how fast these charged particles are moving. You could talk about the colors involved in the auroras, or yeah, just using all your senses. So talk about what people might see, what people might hear. They could touch something, how would that feel? If they could taste something, if you're in food sciences, for example. So yeah, I hope that makes more sense now.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I was just wondering about the words complement what we see. Is that what is the sort of the idea, to complement? If I put a picture on a sunset, so then I explain how the sun is going down. That's the sort of meaning of show, don't tell, that it is sunset, but just explaining how the sunset is going down.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, if you're talking about the sunset, you could say, imagine you're on the beach and you're seeing the sunset and like the sky is glowing orange, and you talk about, the temperature that you might be feeling. So yeah, things like that. Yeah.
Thank you for that. It made sense now. Thank you.
Maybe I could quickly ask something. Because often conference talks would be very short. I was in one just the other week, which was 12 minutes. So I feel like I wouldn't be able to manage a sort of proper story structure in a short time like that, where I also need to get a lot of information across. How do you sort of balance that?
Yeah. I think about like, what are the important points of the topic you're talking about? Are there any like particularly interesting parts to not just your results, but how you got to your results? So, was there a point where you thought, you're going to give up because nothing was working? So it's really, picking out what's important to the main point that you're trying to talk about. I hope that makes sense. I'm not sure if that did. I think having your main point sort of front and center is really important, because then that really helps you to find out how you can move your story along. So it is really hard to include every sort of tools and things I talk about, and I don't do that all the time. It's sort of finding out what will work for the time that you have and the point that you're trying to get across.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I hope that answers the question. Monica, the suggestion to end up in a different place than is stated in the beginning, we have an example how to do that? Are there any caveats with the strategy? I'm just thinking of a typical suggestion that conclusions should come back to the problem posed in the intro to make up a whole and not wander off too much. So you could say, so the journey that you've taken in your research or in science, how you ended up will be different to how you started, because you know more now about what you're trying to find out. you might have found that you solved the problem that you were trying to solve, or that actually you asked the wrong question in the beginning. So you started off at a different point because you now know the questions that you should have asked in the first place. Are there any caveats with this strategy? I'm not sure, actually. I think in a science talk, usually you want to tell them about what you find out, right? So it's going to be quite natural that you're going to end in a different place to where you started. Claire.
Hello, thank you for a fabulous talk. I just had a quick question, and it's just out of curiosity because I'm not sure if you've heard. I think it's Ben Goldacre has always said, "Oh, we shouldn't use, analogies and metaphors." And I have my opinion on this, but I just wondered if you would like to maybe expand a bit more on your own.
Yeah, I think you have to be careful in the analogies and the similes and the metaphors that you use, because you could easily create, misconceptions, which will basically do the opposite of what you wanted to do in the first place, right? So I think trying to come up with an analogy in the first place is going to be the hardest thing to do, to make sure that it's accurate and relatable. And I think it might actually be easier in some parts of science than others. I think anything to do with medicine, anything to do that's going to impact on a person's life, I think is harder than something that's a bit more abstract, like particle physics or astronomy. So yeah, I think just be careful about what analogies you use, definitely.
So cool. I think I would feel similarly, but it's something that I think a lot of people have different opinions on.
And sometimes like, do you actually need to use an analogy? Sometimes it might actually be easier to just tell them what you're telling them.
Yeah. Thank you.
Alice.
Hey, I wondered if you'd ever had any sort of negative reactions especially from astronomers or anyone, saying storytelling is unscientific and we should just write in academic journals.
I've never had anyone say that to me, like to my face. But my argument would be, luckily, it's always worked for me. And I honestly feel like that's the reason why all of my telescope proposals have been accepted, and why all my funding, proposals have been accepted. So to me, that's proof that it works. Yeah.
I completely agree with you. I've had a couple of negative comments myself that way, but I've just steadfastly disagreed with them, and it's very nice to hear that from you.
Do we have more questions from the audience? And if that's not the case, Alice, would you like to say something, or Affelia as well? Would you like to say something to close?
Yeah, you can go first, Ophelia.
So this does take time and practice. So if you can't do it for your next talk, then don't worry, just keep going. And just practice and try it out on, you know, some friends or some colleagues, see what works before you actually present it at a big conference.
Yeah, I like that as well. So thank you. So what I have to say is not to our speaker, but to all my colleagues working in citizen science. I think what we do is a wonderful and human thing. And I'm really looking forward to us telling all the stories we tell about it, about what it's like to do it, about what it's like to work with so many communities as many of us do. Yeah, I think this has been an incredibly valuable talk, and I'm very grateful that you came along. So, and thank you very much all for attending, and thank you to Affelia, our wonderful speaker. Round of applause.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I joined the applause round, and I thank you, Ophelia, for coming here. Thank you, Alice, and the working group of storytelling and other arts for organizing this and making it possible. And just a reminder that next week on Thursday at 11, we will have another webinar. This time will be not so broad like this one, and the topic will be on a specific project and what this project has brought to the citizen science community. So I hope to see many of you there. And thank you everyone for being here.